I don't usually do this at night. I'm trying to balance the light a little bit. Okay. Hello and welcome to Great Things with Great Tech, episode 16. My name's Anthony Spiteri, and this podcast is all about highlighting companies doing great things with great technology. And in this episode, we're talking to Dirk Arends, President of Virtual Systems. Welcome to the show, Dirk.
Thanks for having me on, Anthony.
Excellent. Good to have you on this fine morning over there. I can see the sun's just coming up for you and it's set well and truly for me over here. Look, just before we get into the show and talk about virtual systems, as usual, if you guys out there love great things with great tech and would like to feature on future episodes, you can click on the link in the show notes or go to launch.gtwgt.com and register your interest. This is the last show for 2020, Dirk. So we had 16 shows. That's pretty good effort, more than whatever I thought when I first started this about 6 or so months ago. So next week, actually, just as a bit of a plug, we're going to be doing a 2020 wrap show, highlighting the first 16 episodes with a special return guest. So that'll happen next week. It's probably just give it away. It's not you, but it's someone else from the 16 episodes.
I figured it wasn't.
But just as well, if you want to subscribe to the show, please click on the link below in YouTube or in your favorite podcast station. So with that, let's kick off virtual systems. Kind of going back to my roots. Last couple of episodes have been, about different industries, about storage, about companies doing Kubernetes. Back to my roots, service providers, virtual systems. Basically kicked off, Dirk, in 2003. But maybe just before we talk about the history and how you guys got started, just give a little bit of a background about virtual systems and what you guys do.
Yeah, we're, like you said, we're a cloud service provider. So we do really that infrastructure as a service or managed infrastructure as a service for, anything from SMB space up to enterprise space. So, the idea is that whole cloud delivery model in a really accessible way. Could be backup and disaster recovery, could be desktop as a service or hosted applications. So, yep.
Excellent. Yeah, no worries. So, quite a tailored sort of set of services there. Like from what I saw on the website, nothing, not super broad, but basically doing what you guys do really well from what I've seen. But, let's track back. I know you joined the company in 2016, but I know that itself, the company before it was Virtual Systems was founded as such by an investment group of about 30 to 40 investors in 2003 as Freedom Net Wireless. Talk a little bit about that and the early days of the company and Larry Van der Veen, who was a key guy back then and I believe is still your CEO.
Yeah. It's funny because we really almost came about accidentally. We started as an internet service provider, like you said, under Freedom Net Wireless, started providing internet where there wasn't any. So a group of folks who had some experience in that internet service provider field said, hey, we know how to build out networks. Let's go build out a network. We'll talk to some farmers. We'll build it out where nobody is. And pretty easy to get subscribers when you do that. And they did a great job. They executed well. And they brought on some businesses who were having a hard time getting the internet. Those businesses start asking questions about, hey, what else do you do? Can we do some other technology solutions? And we had a really talented engineering team who did that, started providing data center solutions, said, hey, we'll give you the connectivity. We'll also build you up in a data center down the street and you can subscribe to this solution. We'll tailor it to you. And it was VMware platform stuff and Dell infrastructure underneath. And it was, blade chassis architecture with Dell storage and, back then. And it just took off, and it took off so well that they decided at that time, this was before I came in, but they decided, hey, let's rebrand this and spin it off as a separate company and let those two things move independently. So
that was about 2010, but just going back to the start. So you mentioned rural. So this was in Michigan, right? From the research that I've done. So you guys are still there based out of Michigan. So in terms of this, because obviously I know rural Australia. I know it's a big place. We've obviously not as heavily densely populated as what you guys are. But I'm going to assume that there were challenges with connectivity out there. And, thinking about the 2003 to 2007 timeframes, are we talking ADSL or are we talking sort of higher end, early fiber? Where did, Freedom Net basically make a lot of its, inroads at that time?
Yeah, early fiber. Yep.
Okay. Okay, cool. So, and that's what I mean. So compared to what we were doing back in 2003, 7, I mean, that's when I kind of started working for, a company called DRaaS, which was a ISP and an ASP back then. But
Yep.
predominantly speaking, it was all dial-up on the old ISDN lines and that sort of thing. But that's what
Yeah.
we had. Fiber was but a dream for us. So it's just interesting to
Yeah.
see the differences back then. But I mean, you mentioned like 2007, from what I understand, there was about 4,000 customers in FreedomNet, right? So, that's
Yeah.
a
They
really
grew pretty
good base
quick.
to build what you've talked about, right? You've got this customer base. You effectively basically got a distribution point at that point, right? A distribution channel,
Yeah.
sorry, where you
Yeah,
can
you're
put in
right.
these other technologies. So in 2010, what was around in terms of what you're offering apart from the connectivity? I mean, was it virtual servers? What did that look like back
Yeah.
then?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it was. It was really just kind of hosted servers. We did some websites. It was just kind of, like I said, almost accidental. So we were trying to figure ourselves out. I subscribe to the podcast here, and I mean, you do some terrific interviews with great service providers, and a lot of them came to the market with, a very well articulated business plan
Yeah.
and maybe some investments, or somebody came out of IT and said, in the case of like an offsite data sync, where you've got, hey, let's do backup and disaster recovery exclusively. Let's do it well. And this was a little bit of, we had some years where we were saying, okay, we know we got a great team of engineers. We've got a great tech stack. How do we, continue to capitalize on that? And what do we do? What lane do we stay in, kind of? So it was VMware stuff. We were
Yeah.
VMware from the beginning. We weren't obviously a big partner right out of the gate, but we knew it well. And and that was the stack. It was mostly, it was a little bit of actually desktop as a service too. I think we still have a
Okay.
product set that's QuickBooks hosting. And I think of it kind of like a footnote product set, but it really helped us get off the ground in terms of how we started to identify that product set and its capabilities, that VDI product set.
Yeah.
Which, we're not post-pandemic yet. I mean, I guess we could say post-pandemic in the sense that, it's happened and now we're aware of this possibility. And now we've all been through this thing where we've got to work remotely and people can't come into the office. And so that product set has been pretty big for us and important this year. But I think we really cut our teeth on that doing some QuickBooks hosting way back in the day,
That's
because
interesting.
it was really just application hosting. We grabbed an application, put it on a Windows desktop, and delivered
Yep.
that persistent Windows desktop to individual users, and used VMware NSX to microsegment the network and keep everybody from seeing each other. So it was a great way to host that product. And that was where we kind of started learning that set. And over the years, really kind of developed into, now a cloud verified provider, which is, VMware's top tier of cloud provider. So,
Wow. Okay. So just going back to VDI, because I've got an interesting sort of history there as well. I definitely, I remember my first project when I joined Zetagrid, which was a company that I worked before I joined Veeam. And that was, we're going to say late 2013. My first project was basically to install Horizon. Horizon had just came out. So whatever it was called before that, I can't actually remember what it was called before that, but it was Horizon. And we're actually hosting that within vCloud Director. And we created some automation to basically do VDI as a service through VCD. And it worked really well. Had one fairly big anchor customer, I remember, that was based out of Melbourne. That was kind of underpinning the rest of the services around the country. But it just wasn't quite there. It just didn't quite work as well. And the experience that customers were having wasn't equal to what the expectation was. So how did you guys manage to break that fairly common trend with VDI, which is customer expectation versus reality of what you're delivering?
Yeah, that's I think a really good question, because I think part of the success of VDI, to bring it into a customer's environment and start to meet that expectation, you operationally have to have some things in place as a business that support the fact that your company is doing VDI. And so I think, being willing to go outside of the technology conversation and talk with a customer about operations and how they're managing security, on their workstations, how they're thinking about, persistence and non-persistence in the desktop environment. And when you were doing it, probably the technology wasn't quite as good. I mean, VMware does a terrific job, I think, of continuing to iterate on that product and continuing to get out updates. And keep it fresh and get rid of problems, and especially around that Horizon client. That client does a lot in terms of, compressing data and making sure that that end user is having a nice, smooth, clean end user experience. So, I don't know exactly. I'm interested in kind of the nuances of the problems that you were having there, but what we're seeing in the market today is if we can help have some of that conversation on the front end and say, hey, operationally, there's some good, there will be some differences in how you execute end user computing in the company, whether you got 20 employees or 20,000, you got to be thinking about end user computing a little bit differently. And if you are, this is going to blow your mind. This is going to be terrific for you.
Yeah, I think from memory, my problems or our problems was based on storage and just performance, right? Not so much the tech, but the storage and the understanding that was causing the major issues. And maybe that was more our fault, trying to be cheap in cutting corners and not giving it the resources and the respect that it desired at that point. But I remember when the Blast, around that time when Verizon came out, was when Blast protocol came out, and Blast was a revelation because PC over IP was good, but it was, from what I understand, extremely was hungry in terms of bandwidth. And Blast protocol HTML5, to have it in your actual desktop. I mean, I took that and presented that into VMware roadshows, and it was just amazing to do it at that point in time. But I'm guessing that's also how you guys are doing it, right? Through Blast, just horses for courses, and getting the application delivered.
Yeah, you're right. And I think Blast was a catalyzing factor in maybe some more VDI adoption. And, we run into people all the time who had a past with VDI. They implemented it years ago, maybe a decade ago, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. They, like exactly what you said, they liked it, but some of what their expectation was didn't get met by what the product was delivering. And so there's resistance to even explore it again. And now when they explore it, especially with, the Blast protocol and doing some different things, I think, like you said, on storage and profile management, to keep storage low and to think about, well, do I want this thing to persist or don't I want it to persist? How easy is this thing to consume? And, VDI is a complicated product. VMware VDI is pretty complex. And so I know we'll get into this a little bit more, but part of the innovation behind virtual systems is how do we deliver a very complicated product in a very easy to consume and digest way for companies who don't necessarily have the expertise to manage all that, but we want to still do it in a way that as they start peeling back the layers of complexity, they can make changes as they need to. So kind of this easy to consume, easy button on the surface. But as we start to get, deeper into the product and needs change within the organization, we can still, kind of pivot and make those changes. But I mean, Blast has been, I think, a terrific catalyst for, a better end user experience and really business experience all the way around for that.
Yeah, it was one of those great acquisitions, I think, that VMware made for memory. Sure. But let's get into, let's actually mention innovation. Let's get into that with regards to, what would you consider virtual systems core innovation and services, and you've mentioned a few things about what they're built on, but maybe even just expand a little bit about how they're delivered, what tech you guys are using to procure, the billing, control plan, all that kind of stuff, right? But what would you say is a core innovation?
Yeah, I think like a lot of things right now, the innovation is around the delivery model. So many things that we're consuming today are starting to be consumed on a subscription model. And, we've seen in tech, in IT specifically, managed service providers have always provided this kind of CapEx solution where, we're all solving for tech outcomes. But the way, I think historically, the way that many companies have done it is, we'll solve an outcome, we'll put some servers on site, you buy those servers right out of the gate. As a managed service provider, we'll manage those things for you. And so that's the kind of monthly subscription part. But part of the core innovation for us is really a cloud focus in terms of both where the data sits, but also the consumption model, because I think cloud is both of those things. And when we use the term in technology, you've seen the meme and I've seen the meme, cloud is just somebody else's computer, which is a little depressing to think about, but very true. And in that way, it's not necessarily sexy. All you're doing is data center computing, really. But a lot of what we talk about when we talk about how effective and efficient cloud is, we are talking about the consumption model. It's that easy subscription. I just want to, I want to change what I do on the fly as my business changes. I want to consume it at an easy subscription. So that's where some of the innovation has come in for us. We've innovated a little bit, on that tech stack. I mentioned we started on Dell. We still, are in a chassis blade architecture. We've migrated from Dell to Nimble storage. I know how other service providers do that. Terrific storage. I think I'm not a huge fan of HPE, but one of the best things they ever did was acquire Nimble.
Yeah.
Great storage technology. So, that's the stack underneath, and then VMware. But the other innovative thing that we're doing, to answer your question, is really around kind of building that security and compliance into the tech stack for the customer. So I know there's some other service providers who use, for example, like a Trend Micro, and you can layer that stuff into the solution. But outside of the security, I think these are two separate questions. How are we securing the environment, but how are we meeting compliance demands? And that is becoming, as DR is becoming more of a hot topic. You see insurance companies saying, hey, we'll give you a little bit of a break if you can prove you have a DR solution.
Okay.
Likewise, if you
did not know
proving,
that. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think more and more we're seeing that, especially in highly regulated industries like healthcare, finance. And it has gone from, the checkbox, which says, hey, do you have a DR solution? Check yes or no. Yes, we do. To, the next iteration of that has been, show us that you have a DR solution.
Wow.
Show us that you're running tests.
That's crazy. That's you know what? That's that inflection point that I think everyone's I've been waiting for, certainly. Not only just in general backups, but for DR itself, because like you said before, that there was sort of a notion that DR was something that you might need at some point, not something that you do need to basically run a business and continue to run and get insurance, as dramatic as that is.
Yeah. I mean, I think the cyber events, let's just call them, have become so ubiquitous, so common that, I think it's become a common request to insurance companies. Hey, we had this event. It's costing us X amount of money. Does our insurance cover this? So cybersecurity insurance has come up. And as part of that, obviously the questions back down to the company are, sure, we'll insure you, but show us what you're doing to protect your environment. Show us what you're doing to prove resilience in your environment. And so building some of that stuff right into the tech stack for the business and saying, hey, let's do a, cloud first solution with a lower on-prem footprint that you subscribe to in this nice, clean, easy monthly model, but let's build in the compliance. So if you need, let's say it's a SOC 2, let's say it's a HIPAA, PCI, ITAR, GLBA, whatever that is, let's build that in. So this solution comes with an executive summary for that compliance. We're doing that on a regular basis. So we'll send you the updated one when it happens. And if you want some other security features in there, here's how you layer that stuff in. So
just give me an example of that, right? So just say if it was I'm going to pick one, say if it was a HIPAA. So how do you then, bundle that into the solution? But is it reporting? Is it end to end on the, I'm just trying to sort of get a workaround in my head and how you guys actually do, bundle it and offer it out.
Yeah, it's a great question because it's a complicated answer, and it's not the same for every business. But part of what we do is just outsource the compliance to an external agency. So we have somebody come in on a regular basis and evaluate for HIPAA compliance. So does the infrastructure meet these different compliance requirements? And that's from the data center on up through the infrastructure to the OS and software layers. From there, though, that doesn't necessarily mean the business is doing everything in a HIPAA compliant way. So we also have to provide some education to the customer and say, hey, here's your executive summary around infrastructure. But all this says is that your infrastructure is HIPAA compliant. What you're doing with your data as you move it around, as you send it to customers, doesn't necessarily qualify. So here's some steps that you need to take. And that's just, we can't control everything a customer does, but we can educate them. And that's kind of how we provide the extra value add.
Okay.
Because you can host stuff at a AWS or an Azure. And I think, and we do too. Some of what we do is a managed AWS and Azure. We have a couple of data centers, but public cloud can be great in some ways, but you still need the education around how to use that, how to keep your stuff secure and compliant. It's not impenetrable to anything else going on.
So to that end, you're effectively providing like an end-to-end managed service around that compliancy. That's effectively what you guys are doing. So the tech is your base, and then you basically are wrapping it around, which makes you niche in a way, but also gives you a massive leg up, I think, because if there is this realization that companies do need this for insurance, for their ongoing, business to survive and operate, then they're going to be searching more and more for these providers. And to be honest with you, obviously I know of a few, but I don't know of many, especially I guess outside of the States. Like I think the States is probably a little bit more focused on this, or laser focused more so now than, elsewhere around the world from what I've seen. So yeah, that's a really interesting thing. Security is just so, and you're right, this year, the amount of cyber attacks not only has increased, but also the sophistication around what they're doing has massively gotten a little bit more dangerous as well. So if you can offer those services. So around that, I mean, in terms of your DR services, and backup services, what are you guys offering there?
Yeah, we just do Veeam. That's what we started with way back when we started. I don't actually becoming a partner with them preceded me. We looked at Zerto, Zerto in the market. If you need, that's been the one differentiator. Veeam started as a backup company and has really kind of iterated and migrated more into that DR conversation in some really great and exciting ways. And Zerto really started as a DR company, taking advantage of a way that they could, I don't want to say hack VMware, but use some different things going on in VMware to create some terrific replication.
Now, we've talked about Zerto quite a bit in previous episodes here, and they filled a very important niche back in the day. And I certainly had them in the stack. And I guess I'd say this to a lot of people, even today outside of the show, when I'm talking to customers with my other hat on, is that you want to give your customers options, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But that said, if you can fill the void with one particular vendor, one choke,
one throat to choke.
That's the one. I was getting around the wrong way. Then that's going to be a good outcome as well. We'll probably talk about partnerships towards the end, but that's cool. So you do your backup products, you do offsite backup, you do and DR as a service as well. So you've got
Veeam has been Veeam's been the software layer from the beginning. We, like I said, we did explore Zerto as well as some other things we were doing because we're a VMware partner and deep into VMware. We were doing some SRM for a little bit to kind of address that. But really, it's been quality over quantity for us from the beginning. So we want to do what we do really well, rather than just kind of broadly answer, as many questions as we can for customers. And so we made that business decision not to jump into Zerto. We're a small team. We're still a small team. But we wanted to have, real strong expertise where we played. And so we did let some customers who had that, real high need for, continuous data replication. We'll use the Veeam terminology now. Back then and said, hey, if that's your need, you're going to want to find somebody else. We even gave them some people. Hey, you try these people down the street.
That's being honest. That's being, laser focus on what you guys are doing. Like I said, tight stack, very defined, very focused. And that's a great way to be. And that breeds success for me as well. And the service providers I talk to, the ones that are focused are the ones that succeed. Talking about disruption, so I know you've got some interesting, thoughts around disruption in the market, but what would you say was Virtual Systems' disruptive effort initially?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it is so fun to talk about being a disruptor in the market. And, I wish we could take more credit for the tech stack that we are building, but it's really finding the best stuff and putting those all together into one flavor. And it's been really kind of fun to listen to your podcast because, I ghost shop our competitors, but I don't get to hear how their leaders, are making decisions. And now, with your podcast, I can kind of tune into some of that and they're finding the same tech stack that we are finding, and so that's really that's great also to hear. And
validation is good, right? Yeah. Validation.
It is. Yeah. It is. And so that, part of the innovation is around the flavor of tech stack that we build. But, as I'm saying that, you're hearing that a lot of service providers are doing similar tech stacks. So the other thing I think that I mentioned was really around the innovative things is just delivering that whole secure and compliant model in a way to customers that they can peel off layers very easily. Datto is a good example of this. I think they kind of innovated in the market in a nice way for them, in that they own the hardware. If you don't know Datto, they're a backup and DR provider. They would compete kind of against Veeam or maybe Zerto.
Just IPO'd.
Yeah. They play a little bit in the smaller space because it's a very easy push button deployment. So you buy this, they own the hardware, the software, the cloud. And so you buy the box, you right size the box, and then it does what you need it to do. But as you dig into the layers of a Datto solution, you can't iterate very much on it. It's done for you. And that's both the pro and the con. And where we want to keep some of that, where we want to keep some of that innovation going is taking a software layer like Veeam, where you can do anything, right? Like I remember the tagline for Veeam was, "It just works." Like initially, remember, and that's been really kind of I imagine that became the tagline because everybody who used it was saying that. Whatever I want to do, it
literally the first time I used it, we were we just had a really bad outage with PhD Virtual, and that was ES Express as well at the time, and we installed Veeam. And it just worked, and that even before you knew what the tagline was, that was it, right? So it was pretty easy for Ratme or Timoshay to come up with that. It wasn't the biggest stroke of genius because it was what it was.
I mean, and maybe that's the genius of it, is just
exactly the simplicity of all marketing. You know, someone hasn't charged $1 million to come up with that tagline. It's just kind of generated. But you've mentioned a really good point there, because you know this. And it comes back to, you know, I'll reflect on this next week a little bit probably as well, but this whole podcast was started because it was just companies doing great things with great technology. And you've certainly just effectively explained that, right? The fact that, you know, you can have someone, and I'm not going to sit here and badmouth Datto too much because they do what they do and whatever, but you explained it well. Datto do something great and they do it like in a box, right? And it's a square box, that's it. But what you've got with like VMware, with Veeam, with Zerto, with all these other great software companies, a great bit of software is something that you can take, you can install, and then you can leverage in different ways to create greatness on top of that. And that's what also differentiates the services that you guys create from, you know, your own competitors, yourselves. That differentiation in terms of how you manipulate the software is what makes a virtual system successful. So that's a very important point, and kind of why I started this show, right? It was to highlight companies like Virtual Systems doing great stuff with that software.
Yeah, I think the innovative thing is how, you know, if you can answer this question, how do we put simplicity on the front end for a customer, but still allow for that customizable complexity on the back end? So if you want to just deploy, if you don't have a very technical team and you know what you need from a business outcome standpoint, and you just want to push the easy button, how do we give you the easy button to push? But if you start to get deeper on that thing, or you've got a bigger team and you say, hey, I want easy a little bit to begin with, but I want the complexity of being able to, like you said, do this thing with it, or customize or iterate. You know, how do we still allow for that? And that's where I think Veeam does a terrific job too, at the software layer, of just allowing for so many things. You know, what we're seeing now is I have a buddy who works at a terrific technology company called Elevate down the street here, and he always calls it the catcher's mitt. You know, he's like, you guys are kind of the catcher's mitt on the DR stuff, and that is true in a sense. But what Veeam does, I think, really innovatively, and what we try to push our customers to do is, once your data is offsite, it's somewhere, what can you do with your data to continue to produce great business outcomes? Some of it is we lead that conversation to a customer and say, hey, did you know you can take some of this data, spin it up into a lab environment, practice moving from this outdated thing up to, you can update your systems to this. Let's do that in a lab environment, in your DR scenario, offsite, doesn't affect anything. You'll just practice it for a month, and then you'll spin that environment down and then go. So I think it's a lot of it is getting customers to change their mind about, okay, I got my data offsite. Veeam's 3-2-1 rule was brilliant. 3 copies of your data, 2 locations, one of them's got to be offsite. But now changing that perception to say, okay, well, what do we do with our data once it's somewhere? Should it just sit in the catcher's mitt, or can we manipulate it and use it and pull analytics on it to learn some more things about what's happening in the business?
Activation, data activation there, right? Like, instead of having the data sitting there doing nothing and kind of just costing money for a particular event, why don't you put it to some use? It's a great cornerstone, not just for backup, but for all data really moving forward as data is eating the world. And I've got a saying, like, it's not oil, it's like uranium, right? Because you want to kind of refine it, but you also want to make sure that you use it in the right way and don't let it get into the wrong hands.
Good call.
I think, so, I mean, actually, we'll flip forward, because I think we're kind of on this track anyway, in terms of, I asked this for a lot of the service providers they have on, but what makes a great partner? You've talked about obviously Veeam, VMware, HPE with Nimble, you got Dell there. So what makes those great vendors to partner with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've heard you ask it on other podcasts. I appreciate the answers that, you get a really good breadth of answer. For us, it's really about kind of the posture toward problem solving. We came in with Veeam early on and never left because Veeam has managed to, Veeam grew in size just tremendously, I think, over the last 5-10 years, one of the fastest growing software companies in history, I think, at one point, second only to VMware.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's still the case, but you've been able, even as you scaled, to still have this very personable, accessible side of your technology providers, and partner network that really is problem focused and solution focused. How do we just solve the problem? We're not trying to sell stuff all the time. We're not trying to, we just want to, solve some problems with customers. And I think for us, as we look at our partner network and figure out, who are we working with well, and we've got a channel partnership model too. So we sell direct to customers, but we sell to technology providers who, want to do this stuff as well, but don't necessarily know how to do it. And who we partner with is really those people who can just stay problem and solution focused and recognize that technology is really just this arena where we're solving problems together. We're not necessarily trying to, grow huge companies and feed big egos, but we just want to help people out. And that has, I think, for us, created a real kind of fun and exciting secret sauce that, allows for a really good relationship with a lot of customers and, some really good brand power, I think, for us too. So
that's awesome. Yeah, it's all very valid as well. And you're right. Everyone has a slight tweak and a slight variation to that question, but it all comes down to the relationship. I think that's kind of what builds it. It's not just about the tech. It's not just about the business transaction. That's what you can build great technology partnerships and then great technology upon, which translates to great services for you guys.
Yeah.
Let's talk just to start to wrap up a little bit about, how you're going to continually internally disrupt yourselves and continue innovation in the future. And maybe you mentioned earlier, the public clouds like Azure and AWS and Google's coming up. Are there any plans to kind of work with those guys to integrate those more into the core services? What's the future for virtual systems?
Yeah, we certainly are. I think that's one spot, just kind of innovating around public cloud. And, I mentioned that we're not a huge technology provider ourselves. We certainly don't have the ability to throw 200 SKUs into a box for a customer and say, hey, take your pick, the way that an AWS can. And AWS and Azure and some others are doing some cool public cloud solutions that, I think we want to make accessible to our customers. So that's something that's happening. I came from the wireless industry. I worked for Verizon for a number of years. And, and I get excited about kind of the technology that's happening around the wireless network. So this move to 5G now, and the technology that is coming out of that, and just making high-speed bandwidth available to everybody in a simple way. But I think we're going to start to see where we're doing some innovating this year is around incorporating some of that fast wireless technology right into a backup and disaster recovery solution. So cool. I'm not going to say too much about kind of how we're doing that and where we're doing it, but I'm really excited. Wireless has always kind of sat on the sidelines of, real deep IT conversations, because the nature of a wireless network is that it's not as consistent as a fiber network is. But as that speed and consistency starts to get better and that technology gets better, it's really made its way into kind of mainstream IT conversations. And I think we're just at a point now where we can start to have conversations about, well, what if I started pushing backups over a wireless network? Or I don't know that we're quite to a spot where we can talk about replicating things over a wireless network, but it's getting closer. And so just, again, providing that, really easy turnkey solution where a customer can plug and play a solution. And around backup and disaster recovery, maybe it's the network is included right into that solution. So
which probably simplifies the network a little bit, like the complexity of a layer 2 over an Ethernet or a fiber, having something as accessible as 5G out there and the speed that it gets, that's definitely a game changer. And you're right in that the speed of connectivity, I've said this all year, we just have been so lucky with this situation was happened this year and not 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't believe we would have been built or ready to support the technical requirements that have been needed this year with regards to having, video calls, just general remote work. I don't think it would have happened if we weren't at the point we are with communication technology and 5G coming this year as well. Some the 5G conspiracy theories out there that's just some crazy stuff. But for me to be able to pick up a phone and kind of think that this phone is going to be quicker to download and transfer something over the network than my computer that's hardwired in is mental. But that's where we're going.
It's crazy. Yeah, it is. It's crazy. And so staying on kind of that front end of the, what's I think going to be a pretty significant adoption cycle, but also a technology edge, how do we keep that technology into our IT solutions, I think is going to be a big question as we, go through the next 3, 4, 5 years. No,
I'm really looking forward to seeing where that's going. Good stuff. And just to finish off, just maybe just a bit of a chance for you to sort of speak a little bit about virtual systems. Some of the services you got, any offers, any trials, that sort of thing. Just what would you like to sort of tell the listeners?
Oh yeah. I mean, we're doing free trials on every solution we do. So the VDI thing, one of the most exciting solutions I think of this past year for us was beginning of the pandemic. We had law firm out in LA. They saw us on a webinar and said, "Hey, this is cool. We got people everywhere. We got some, older lawyers who don't know technology very well, but kind of what you're saying is resonating." And a week later, we had them spun up into a VDI environment, 20 people across California who, are all logged in, and we let them try it for free. Hey, we'll build it for you. You try this. We'll make sure it works well. You like it, push the button and we'll go on it. So we always do those free trials. So if you want to experiment and explore it, do it. It's a fun, again, like we're about problem solving and coming together and figuring out, is this the best thing that, we can do for you? So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to shout that out.
Awesome. Good stuff. So what we'll do, we'll add those to the show notes. So they're on every episode list there that we've got. Let's wrap it up now because, again, like I said to all my guests, this has been a very quick 40 minutes of conversation. We could definitely talk more. So the show notes, as I said, will be up there. You can find me at Anthony Spiteri on Twitter, GTWGT Podcast and GTWGT.com. Again, if you aren't subscribed or you're new to the show and you'd like to hear all the episodes, you can subscribe to us on the podcast client, in YouTube, or visit the web at gtwgt.com. And with that, thank you, Dirk. Thank you, Virtual Systems. And we'll catch you next week for the final show of 2020 and look forward to what's beyond. But thank you, Dirk and Virtual Systems.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Thanks for having us on. You do a great podcast. Always fun to listen to these tech leaders across the space.
Cheers, Matt. Thank you.
All right.